What if the story of Jesus had a missing chapter, written not by a follower, but by his own brother? A forgotten gospel claims to do just that. It tells us about Jesus' early family life, secrets about Mary's childhood, why Joseph was chosen, and who the brothers and sisters of Jesus really were. But the church rejected it, even banned it. Why? In this video, we're exploring the Gospel of James, also known as the Protoevangelium of James. You'll discover its shocking claims, its spiritual mysteries, and why it was hidden for centuries. Now, let's begin. James is known as the brother of the Lord. But here, we need to pause. The word brother in ancient texts could mean a lot of things. A biological brother, a cousin, or even a close follower. But many early Christian traditions believed James was the son of Joseph from a previous marriage, making him Jesus' stepbrother. This idea appears in the Gospel of James itself. It tells us that Mary was a virgin, not just before Jesus' birth, but during and after, a concept called the perpetual virginity. So, if Mary remained a virgin her whole life, who were the brothers and sisters of Jesus mentioned in the Bible? The Gospel of James gives an answer. They were children of Joseph, a widower, who already had a family when he was chosen to care for Mary. This is a very different view from what many Christians believe today, and it changes how we understand Jesus' early life. Most Gospels focus on Jesus, but the Gospel of James focuses on Mary. It begins not with her as the mother of Jesus, but as a child herself. Her parents, Joachim and Anna, are old and without children. They pray and fast for years, and finally, they are blessed with a daughter, Mary. From her birth, she is special. She is raised in the temple, fed by angels, and promised to remain pure. When Mary comes of age, the priests decide she must leave the temple and marry. But not just anyone. They choose Joseph, an older man, to be her guardian. Not a husband in the usual sense, but a protector of her virginity. This setup is crucial. It sets the stage for how the early church explained the birth of Jesus as a miracle without human fatherhood. Joseph is chosen not to be a husband, but a witness. The Gospel of James was very popular in the early centuries. People read it to learn more about Mary, about Jesus' childhood, and about the family that raised him. But the church had a problem. This gospel didn't fit with the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It added too many details. Some considered legends, others too mystical. So, in the 4th century, the church officially rejected it. It was called apocryphal, meaning hidden or not accepted. Still, it never disappeared. It was copied, shared, and loved, especially in the Eastern Christian world. And today, modern scholars are rereading it, not as a book of lies, but as a window into how early Christians thought, believed, and dreamed. Part 2. Mary's purity, Joseph's dilemma, and the first signs of controversy. The choice of Joseph. After Mary leaves the temple, the priests face a delicate problem. She has taken a vow of purity, but she cannot stay in the temple forever. She must be entrusted to someone, a man who will respect her vow and protect her from disgrace in a society that would never accept an unmarried woman alone. Not so. The priests turn to divine guidance. They call together a group of older, widowed men from the community. Each man is asked to bring his staff. The idea is that God will reveal the chosen guardian through a sign, and he does. When Joseph brings his staff, a dove suddenly flies out from its tip, a miraculous sign that he is the one chosen by God to care for Mary. Joseph is shocked. He protests. He is an old man with children already. He insists he is not suitable, and he fears ridicule. But the priests insist. This is God's will. This moment sets the stage for one of the most dramatic parts of the Gospel of James: Joseph's internal conflict, his confusion, and eventually, his trust in something far bigger than himself. Joseph takes Mary into his home. Time passes, and he must leave on business. When he returns, he is devastated. Mary is visibly pregnant. He is torn. He doesn't want to shame her publicly, but he also feels betrayed. The Gospel describes his deep sorrow and struggle. He even asks himself if he should hand her over to the priests or hide her quietly. But then, a voice from heaven speaks to him, just like in the Gospel of Matthew. An angel appears in a dream that says, "Do not be afraid. What is within her is from the Holy Spirit." This moment shows a major theme in the Gospel of James: obedience and faith in divine mystery. Joseph accepts the message, but it doesn't solve everything. Because now, the real world comes knocking. Soon, rumors begin to spread. The priests summon both Mary and Joseph to the temple for questioning. They accuse Joseph of breaking the law, of taking Mary as a wife too soon, of hiding her pregnancy, of bringing shame on the community. Mary is also interrogated. She defends her innocence, swearing she has never been touched by a man. But the priests are not satisfied. They subject both Mary and Joseph to an ancient ritual, the water of the Lord's jealousy. This was a real test mentioned in the book of Numbers, meant to uncover guilt. If someone drinks it and survives without harm, they are innocent. Mary and Joseph drink, and nothing happens. The priests are stunned. They are forced to accept the result and Mary's purity. As the pregnancy progresses, Joseph and Mary travel, just as in the biblical nativity. But the Gospel of James adds new mystical details. While on the road, they must stop. Mary is about to give birth. Joseph searches for a place and finally finds a cave. Inside that cave, something miraculous occurs. Joseph describes a sudden stillness in the world. Birds frozen in midair, water stopped in its flow, everything holding its breath. Time itself seems to pause as Jesus is born. This dramatic moment reinforces that this is no ordinary birth. Nature itself reacts to it. Afterward, a midwife named Salome arrives. She doesn't believe that Mary could have given birth and still be a virgin. She doubts, and when she tries to check Mary physically, her hand is paralyzed. Only after she prays for forgiveness does her hand heal. This strange and powerful story illustrates what the Gospel of James wants us to believe. Mary's virginity was not symbolic. It was literal, physical, and miraculous before, during, and even after childbirth. One of the most unique parts of the Gospel of James is its bold claim about Mary's condition after giving birth. In most Gospels, the story ends with Jesus' birth and the arrival of shepherds or wise men. But in this Gospel, something even more dramatic happens, a direct challenge to the idea of divine mystery. After Jesus is born in the cave, a midwife named Salome enters. She doesn't believe the story Joseph tells her, that Mary gave birth without losing her virginity. So she insists on verifying it herself. But the moment she touches Mary, her hand becomes inflamed and paralyzed, a divine punishment for doubting a sacred truth. Terrified, Salome cries out in prayer, asking forgiveness for her unbelief. An angel appears and tells her to touch the baby Jesus. She obeys, and instantly, her hand is healed. This story may sound bizarre today, but it carried a strong message for early Christians. Mary's purity was not only spiritual, it was physical. And questioning that purity had consequences. It's a moment that mixes faith with folklore and theology with mysticism. The Gospel of James has a clear mission: to elevate Mary, not just as the mother of Jesus, but as a holy figure in her own right. It wants us to see her as chosen from before birth, raised in purity, protected by heaven, and untouched by sin. It also shows us a humble Joseph, obedient, faithful, and caught in a mystery much greater than himself. The text plays with ideas of sacred destiny. Angels appear. Signs guide decisions. Time freezes at Jesus' birth. Nature itself acknowledges. The divine dot in many ways. This gospel is less concerned with strict history and more interested in divine drama, painting a picture of a world shaped directly by God's hand. Asterisk, asterisk. So, how did early Christians react to this gospel? Surprisingly, it was very popular. From the 2nd to the 4th century, copies of the Gospel of James spread across the Christian world, especially in the East. It was read in churches, used in teaching, and inspired devotion to Mary. Some of its ideas even entered mainstream Christian belief. The concept of Mary's parents, Joachim and Anna, comes from this gospel. The idea of Mary being raised in the temple, also from here. Even the belief in her perpetual virginity, later accepted by the Catholic and Orthodox churches, has roots in this text, but there was tension. Many church leaders were uncomfortable with how much this gospel added to the story. It wasn't part of the canonical Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it included too many mystical elements. So, by the late 4th century, church authorities started to draw a line. They labeled the Gospel of James as apocryphal, not heretical, but not officially accepted either. It was removed from public readings and discouraged in teaching. Still, the gospel didn't disappear. Its stories lived on through tradition, art, and legend. Even though it was banned, the Gospel of James shaped how millions of people came to see Mary. Paintings of her childhood, feast days for her parents, and the belief that she was ever virgin, all trace back to this single forgotten text. In other words, the Gospel of James was rejected by the official church, but it quietly shaped Christianity from the shadows. And today, scholars are rereading it, not just for its spiritual message, but as a clue to what early Christians truly believed before church doctrine became fixed. This isn't just a story of Mary or Joseph or James. It's a story about faith, power, and the voices that were nearly silenced. Part 4. The Gospel's origins, influence, and why it was really rejected. Asterisk, asterisk. One of the most intriguing questions scholars ask is, where did the Gospel of James come from? It wasn't written by James himself, at least not in the literal sense. Most experts date the text to around 150 AD, about a century after the life of Jesus. That means it was written during a time when stories about Jesus and his family were still being collected, shared, and shaped. So why pretend it was written by James? In the ancient world, it was common to attribute writings to important figures to give them authority. If a text came from someone close to Jesus, like his brother, people would be more likely to trust it. It wasn't seen as lying, but as a way to connect the message to sacred memory. And what a message it carried. That Mary's holiness was planned from the beginning. That Joseph was chosen by God. That Jesus' birth was more than a miracle. It was a cosmic event. This gospel came from Christian communities deeply devoted to Mary and interested in her life beyond what the canonical Gospels revealed. Asterisk, asterisk, even. Though the Gospel of James was banned from the official Bible, its influence was massive. For example, the idea that Mary was born to elderly, barren parents, that came from this gospel. So did the image of her living in the temple as a child, fed by angels, surrounded by holiness, and Joseph as a wise older guardian, not a romantic partner. That's straight from here. Over time, these stories became part of Christian tradition. They inspired art, prayers, feast days, and church teachings, especially in Eastern Christianity. In fact, without the Gospel of James, the Catholic doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, and the Orthodox celebration of Mary's entrance into the temple might not exist in their current form. This gospel shaped how believers viewed Mary, not just as the mother of Jesus, but as a woman marked by God's grace from the very start. Asterisk, asterisk. But if this gospel was so beloved, why did the church reject it? Part of the answer lies in control. As Christianity grew, church leaders needed to define what was true, which gospels could be trusted, and which ones might confuse or divide believers. By the 4th century, they chose 4 gospels to include in the New Testament. Everything else, including the Gospel of James, was labeled as Apocrypha. But there was another reason too. The Gospel of James was too bold. It added stories never told before. It described miracles with no witnesses. It presented theological ideas, like the perpetual virginity, in dramatic, almost mystical terms. For church leaders focused on clarity and doctrine, that was a risk. It wasn't that the gospel was wrong, but that it was too wild, too symbolic, and too different. And so it was pushed aside. Asterisk, asterisk, yet this rejection only makes the gospel of James more important today. Because it shows us something precious. How early Christians thought before the rules were written. It reveals their deep love for Mary, their struggle to understand Jesus' mysterious birth, their hunger for more stories, more meaning, more connection to the divine. This was not a church yet. It was a movement, a community trying to make sense of a miracle that changed the world. And in that early age of wonder and questioning, the Gospel of James stood as one of the boldest voices. Asterisk, asterisk, the Gospel of James may not have made it into the Bible, but its echo never faded. It shaped traditions, inspired devotion, and offered an intimate look at the people closest to Jesus. Through it, we meet a Mary who is more than a name, a chosen soul wrapped in holiness from birth, a Joseph torn between duty and mystery, and a James who, centuries later, still speaks through a gospel that refuses to be forgotten. In the end, this gospel challenges us to ask, what stories were lost and why? Sometimes the most powerful truths aren't the ones we read in official books. They're the ones whispered across generations, surviving through faith, imagination, and the hunger to know more.